Question I just asked myself. I didn't think I'd ever have to ask myself. Where did I put my fake crowbar? Uh, so I can explain the jewels and the bears and the Mulan shirt. Because I have a Disney centric brain and a Pokemon brain. So, this video is going to be about kind of what I think about what they're showing with Bonney and Kuma, the additional information and stuff like that that we've gotten about them in the last chapter and stuff like that, about stuff that we've seen about, their relationship and what, additional things that we've learned about Bonney's devil fruit and Kuma's devil fruit and such like that. I'm going to have a different video where I kind of have some idea of what I think might happen with Stussy, and then I'm going to have a different video where I delve much more into the like the weight of a soul, the weight of memories type thing that is kind of part of the centerpiece of this chapter. But this one's mostly focusing on the Bonney and Kuma stuff. So, the jewels. We find out something about Bonney's devil fruit that applies different things with jewels. So I pulled out my more gaudy necklace. I think it's actually the most gaudy necklace I have, which is saying something because I don't actually have that many gaudy necklaces. The Mulan shirt is because during this chapter we have Bonney chasing, Vegapunk around more with her, pipe, which is why I was trying to figure out where I put my fake rubber crowbar that I have. And I couldn't find it. I think it's somewhere in the closet, but it's buried, and I didn't want to worry about digging it out right now. Because we have Bonney chasing Vegapunk around with that, instead of the laser sword that calls the bugs. And then I have the bears, of course, because Kuma, bear. But the Mulan shirt is because out of a lot of the Disney princesses, and Bonney is a princess. This has now technically been confirmed with the fact that her father was a king, so she's a princess. She was the princess of the Sorbet Kingdom for however long. But I am Mulan because out of most of the Disney princesses, classic ones, I mean, like you throw in Moana now, and you got Merida and stuff like that. They'll chase you down if you do something with your dad. If you try to hurt their father, they will chase you down with sword, bow and arrow, or in Moana's case, and make you pay for the fact that you hurt their father. So I figured that was somewhat appropriate. I do have thoughts about what's going on with Stussy, and I'll do that in a different video. And I know a lot of people have like their own thoughts, but and some of mine might be somewhat similar to what other people have, because that's the way stuff happens with One Piece. And also I'll probably end up watching at least 1 or 2 chapter reviews before I do that video, but this is the main one that I wanted to talk about because I've tended to do a lot of different family videos and stuff like that for One Piece, and this one's going to be focusing on Bonney and Kuma. So out of the rambling. Bonney is very quickly becoming one of my favorite supernovas, very quickly. I kind of liked her anyway, like more than Apu and Arouge. If we find out more about Arouge, I'll be a little more interested in him. But Bonney, Luffy and Zoro are some of my favorites, and then you got Law. I'm okay with Kid and Killer, but I think Bonney is like coming up like 3rd or 4th, tied in there with like Beji, because I'm like I'm watching the Whole Cake Island stuff right now, for the English dub, and we get to see a lot of like what Beji is willing to do for Chiffon and Pez and stuff like that. So yeah. Bonney is quickly becoming one of my favorite supernovas. So the chapter starts with like Bonney pretending to be hurt as like a little child, and Vegapunk sees her and he's like, "Oh no, Bonney got hurt," and he runs over to check on her and everything, and then she just like uses a new thing that we've learned her devil fruit can do that is called distorted future, which makes perfect sense because basically the stuff that we've seen her do. Hi, Rainy. Basically, the stuff we've seen her devil fruit do is, age people up and age people down, and we've also seen her age, in Stampede, we saw her, like, age bird eggs into birds, and then use that as, like, a cover for one of her attacks, which is a fairly good idea. But in that regard, one of the other things that happens is, in the chapter, is we also see that, she uses this power that's called distorted future, and it seems to like buff her up a lot. And I love the fact she basically tricked Vegapunk, and for being the smartest man in the world and having literally the biggest brain of any human on the planet, I mean, like, technically Laboon's brain might be bigger and some of the giants' brains might be bigger, but in comparison, he has the largest brain, considering that it's literally like in like a hangar that you put like a plane in or something like that in punk records. You know, he still falls for the, oh, small girl that was chasing me around with a pipe fell and now she's hurt. I must go help her. Oh, God, Vegapunk. Um, but it shows that he does care about her, so yeah. He goes to help her, and then Bonney uses Distorted Future to, like, make herself a lot more muscular and stuff like that. I'm assuming this is a power that allows her to kind of show, I'm assuming the power doesn't last exceedingly long, because she even says that, like, her power doesn't last on living things for very long. You know, it only lasts for like a certain amount of time, and I would assume that this power is also one of those things. This effect is one of those things that only lasts for a certain amount of time. So it's not something that she could, like, you know, have it going on herself all the time and then just always be like this really buff form that we see her in. But she gets really big and strong, and then she, like, attacks Vegapunk with, like, the pipe that she's carrying around, and she kind of, like, stabs his back with it. And she kind of ejects all these things that look like jewels out of him. And, it turns Vegapunk into a child, and he sees all of these different all of these different jewels that kind of just, like, pop out of his chest as he turns into a small child. And it's just, he's just like, oh no, all my jewel years, all of my, all of his aging and everything like that. And Bonney just picks him up. She's like, oh, don't worry, it won't last very long. It doesn't last long on, living things. And I'm assuming that might be either that's something that already was part of, like, her name, because, like, we know her as Jewelry Bonney, is what we've known her as since she was introduced in Sabaody, Jewelry. But she technically her name, I think, would be Bartholomew Bonney, would be her name. Unless Bonney is also a nickname, but it would be technically, with, Kuma being her dad, it would be Bartholomew Bonney. So again, the world government is trying to hide who she is in relation to Bonney, so they have her be called Jewelry Bonney. And if they know what her devil fruit is, and they know that she can do this, they would probably put jewelry. Or it's just ironic, and it's just Oda going, ha ha, look what I did. Somewhere in the middle. But the thing that I see with that is I have to take this necklace off because I can only stand this necklace for so long. But where's the clasp? But one of the other things that we see is, because in the past when we've seen Bonney use her powers, because the first time we saw her use her powers was at Sabaody, and she used it on a bunch of Marines, and she turned them into, like, little kids and old men. We did not see, like, all of these different jewel things and stuff like that pop out of them. So my thought is that either this is a more advanced version of it, that maybe if she puts their years, quote unquote, into, like, these jewels, they stay younger longer. As opposed to, if she just, like, turns them into, like, old men and little kids for, like, it only lasts for a short amount of time. But, we see this happen, and then we have Bonney just, like, literally picks up Vegapunk and, like, picks up small child Vegapunk and, like, pins him to the wall. And she's like, tell me what you did to my dad. Tell me, why you did this. Why can't you just tell me what you did to him? Because, I mean, when Bonney was talking with Luffy and Jinbei and Chopper, she said that she wanted to talk to Vegapunk, and she wanted to find out why he did what he did. And then, depending on his answer, would determine whether or not she was going to try to, hurt him. And in this case, she didn't like the answer of, like, I can't tell you what happened, and no, I can't turn your dad back to normal. She didn't like that answer. So we have Vegapunk, is now pinned by Bonney, and he's like, well, I can't tell you because I promised Kuma that I would never tell you what I did to him. What, Kuma let Vegapunk do to him. And we get some of these different flashbacks in this time frame. And I would say that Bonney is rightfully angry with Vegapunk for refusing to tell her about what he did to her father. But we have it that, we get this flashback where we see, Kuma and Vegapunk talking. And we learn that there's this thing that is called the mass of a soul, or the weight of a soul, or something like that, which is a concept that I've heard before. And when Vegapunk explains it is, he says that, well, there's a scientist in the West Blue, or at least that's what I saw in the translation I read, that has determined that the soul has weight, that like memories have weight, and that if that if you had the ability to like, extract someone's memories and weigh them, then you could kind of like confirm this one way or the other. That there was a scientist that had been like weighing bodies, weighing people like right before they died and right after they died, and that he found that there was like this 21 grams of difference. Now, this is a reference to an experiment that is called the 21 gram experiment. And it's not an exceedingly, it's somewhat talked about in the regard of like the, the ethereal type of like when it comes to like the weight of a soul, and I'll delve into it a lot more in a bit more in a different video. But it's basically the concept that this guy that was called like McDougal, or I think that was his last name, that he was this physician, and he like decided to test this stuff, but he ended up, his results were like skewed and stuff like that. So, and it's something that's very hard to prove one way or the other, and there wasn't a lot of evidence, against or for in this regard. And a lot of the different people in the scientific community, because McDougal wasn't exactly like a fully trained scientist or anything like that. He didn't have like a scientific or biological background or anything like that, or at least not as high level as a lot of the other people in the scientific community did. But he's like, oh, well, it's, that's the weight of the soul leaving the body is 21 grams, which is what this is referencing. And I had heard of that before. I'd heard somewhere in like whatever various number of documentaries and stuff like that I've watched, that I had heard that there was this concept before. Don't ask me where, I don't remember, but I remember that I'd heard of it before. And I actually asked one of my coworkers last night while I'm working. I'm like texting him and like, hey, have you ever heard of this? And he's like, no. And I'm like, well, this is what it is. And he's like, oh, well, that sounds interesting. And then he like read more of it. But we get this moment where, Bonney is, yelling at Vegapunk that it's just like, there's no way that Kuma would just leave her and die, would leave her and then just die. There's no way that he would do that, because like, he's her father, he loves her. And the majority of the relationships that we've seen in One Piece that are, father-daughter relationships that we've seen over the course of the story usually tend to be pretty solid. And I'm going to do a video where I kind of do comparison of that. We're comparing like all these good father-daughter relationships to a bunch of these different bad a couple of different bad father-daughter relationships that we see in One Piece. But Bonney and Kuma seem to be kind of one of the ones that seems to be shaping up to be a pretty good relationship. And even Vegapunk says that he respected Kuma very much, that he was an honorable man and a praiseworthy friend. And we get these flashbacks where we see Kuma and Vegapunk talking, and he's like, well, there's this thing, the weight of memories and whatever, which is, I think, where the title of the chapter comes from. And it's just like, your devil fruit, this is where we learn a little bit more about Vegapunk's devil fruit, or not Vegapunk, about Kuma's devil fruit, that it's, if, he can make invisible things real, like pain and like, the sensation of nerves and stuff like that, like he can make those physically real with his Nikyu no Mi. And Vegapunk is very interested to see about if that is something that they can use to like use the devil fruit power to like force all of Kuma's memories outside of his body and into like one of the little paw bubbles. Well, it wouldn't be little, it's big, but the paw bubbles that he can make, that like the Ursa shock and stuff like that. And we get this idea that, because we've seen Kuma do something similar to this before. We saw this happen on Thriller Bark when he, picked up Luffy and like forced all of Luffy's, pain and exhaustion and everything like that out of Luffy, and then turned it into the giant, bubble. And he tells, this is what happens with Zoro, where it's just like, if you can, get past this, if you can hold on, take all of this exhaustion and pain and everything like that your captain has, incurred during the course of these, these battles and stuff like that with oars and with, Moria and stuff like that. if you can withstand that, then I will let you and your crew go. And this, of course, results in, Zoro taking that power, shoving his hands into it and just like, taking all of that power, all of that, not power, all of that pain and exhaustion onto himself. And of course, that results in the nothing happened moment later on. But we've also seen Kuma, the main things we see them do for like attacks is, of course, like the Ursus shock and stuff like that, or like sending out like the clumps of air and stuff like that result in like, they're powerful enough explosions that they can knock you back. And in the case of the Ursus shock, cause a lot of physical damage as well. And yeah, we've seen him do that with, exhaustion and, pain and stuff like that, like what he did to Luffy and Zoro. So the concept of him being able to do a similar thing with memories kind of makes sense in that regard. Now, whether or not Kuma would have thought of that on his own at some point in time, although what I'm going to get to in a second might show that might have been something that happened. But what we see is, Vegapunk ends up like begging Kuma to like try this, to like test out this power. Vegapunk also points out that, just like what happened with Luffy and Zoro, that, Kuma can, extract those, those feelings from one thing and put it into another. In this regard, I would also assume that he could do the same thing with like happiness or sadness or something like that, which, depending on how you're, operating this way with a devil fruit, could also be a good thing or a bad thing. Like, for example, he did with Luffy, where he took all of the exhaustion and everything out of Luffy, and the exhaustion and pain out of Luffy and everything. And if he'd done that with like the rest of the Straw Hats and like the rest of the people that had been on Thriller Bark, like just take all of that exhaustion and pain and stuff away from them, then they probably would have been able to heal quicker. And then he has like these giant masses of like pain and, exhaustion and everything like that. And I have no idea what he's going to do with them, but, he would have those. I guess he could just like literally drop them into the ocean and like let them explode or something like that. I don't know exactly what type of, what that would result in, but he could probably do that. But that also implies that he can do that with those emotions. Can he also do that with, happiness? Like, could he walk over to someone who's like exceedingly happy and like, just like, Ursus pull or whatever, all of those, that happy feeling out of them, not take the memories, but take the feeling of happiness out of them. And then I guess leave them like with nothing but sadness, or vice versa, take all of the sad, not sad that goes into the smile devil fruits, but just like sadness in general, take that out of a person, and then would they just be happy? Because you do the same thing with love, because you do the same thing with hate, because you do the same thing with disgust. I'm running through inside out emotions at this point in time. Anger, whatever. Could you do that with all of that stuff? Because it sometimes, it's like that is a feeling, that is an emotion. But Vegapunk also points out that, when it comes to, pain, that is like a physical thing that you can feel. Because it's like, you can burn your hand, or you could get a cut, or you could break your arm or your leg or something like that. And yeah, you're going to feel pain from having that happen to you. So in that regard, that would be something that you could transfer, because he's like, you can transfer that effect to other people, which is exactly what he does between Zoro and Luffy with the pain. But we also know that he can, use his, shot, his, air bubble things to like send people flying for, however long period of time. To different islands, which is exactly what he did to, Perona on Thriller Bark, and then what he did to all the Straw Hats on Sabo Odi. Possibly what we think happened with, like Sabo and Vivi and stuff like that from, Reverie, depending on stuff, because we know that Kuma got away from Reverie. I'll get to that in a second. But we have this moment where like, we get that, little flashback between Kuma and Vegapunk. And this is probably before Vegapunk has started doing all of his other experiments on Kuma. I don't remember if we see exactly, I don't remember if Vegapunk is like the middle age, like the 40-something-year-old self that we see him at in the flashback for Ohara, or if it's, I think it's more like the Einstein-looking version that we get of him, that is this more current look. So I don't remember if we ever get an exact time frame for how long Kuma has been, away from the Revolutionary Army and working for Vegapunk. It's at least been 2 years. I would say probably closer to like 5. But again, we don't know. I don't remember if we've gotten an exact date on that. And clearly he had his devil fruit power for quite a while before them, if Bonney knows a fair amount about how her father's power works, because she states that in a moment, she states that she knows how her father's, that's not what that is. She says something that doesn't like, no, I know how my dad's devil fruit works, and that's not what that is. So I'm kind of thinking that, clearly as a fan base, we're like, okay, so Kuma left the Revolutionary Army to go and work for Vegapunk. And then via certain things that happened, because Vegapunk was definitely kind of working with the Revolutionary Army, even though he was working for the world government and the Gorosei and stuff like that, his allegiances more lied with the Revolutionary Army and with their cause and with fighting to make the world better. And, there's that, connection there that, Kuma went to go do that and everything. He's pretending to be this former pirate. Well, he is still a pirate, but pretending to be the pirate that goes and becomes a warlord and goes and allows himself to be experimented on by Vegapunk and stuff like that. And then Dragon and Vegapunk and Kuma to a degree use that to their advantage. In regards to turning, Kuma into the PX0 and then having all of the other PXs made. And then subsequently like the Seraphim that are also still based on that type of technology and stuff like that, was what Kuma was turned into as a cyborg and stuff like that. And we get this moment where, Bonney hears something while she's like trying to interrogate Vegapunk, and she like looks over and she sees this door that has this paw print on it that looks exactly the way that, the paw prints look from her father's power. And she like drops Vegapunk and walks over, and he's like, no, don't go in there. That has nothing to do with your dad. It's literally like this door, but she can look at him and go, there's a paw print on this door that looks exactly like the paw prints that my dad's power makes. Therefore, I'm pretty sure it has something to do with my father. And she walks over to like, there's this giant like metal lock around the door to prevent it from opening. And she just like touches it and uses like, I think the attack was like translated as like oil shock or something like that in what I read. And it's basically she's either aging it up or down. It's like she's aging it up to the point where it's like getting corroded and rusted and it just falls apart. But it also looks like it just kind of turns into liquid. So it could also just be that she's like reversing it and making it younger, as in like turning it back to the liquid state that it would have been in order, before it was turned into this, lock and stuff. And she just, corrodes it away or whatever. And then she's able to open the door and she sees this giant paw that's the same type of paw that was like the Luffy's exhaustion was in and stuff like that, sitting there. And Vegapunk tries to tell her, no, don't use that has pain in it. There's don't touch that, it's full of pain, it's enough to kill you. And Bonney is just like looking at this giant paw, and because we don't know what color it's supposed to be. In the anime they made the paw that came out of Luffy, I think they made it red, so that kind of represents pain. So I don't know what color this one's going to be. I would assume, since it's supposed to look different, I would assume that they'll hopefully going to make it a different color than what they had the one at Thriller Bark be. But Bonnie's looking at it and she's like, no, I know how my dad's power worked. This isn't pain. These are his memories. And we don't see anything floating in this paw. So that implies that Kuma has done something like this before and Bonney has seen him do it. And that's kind of an amazing thought, or that's a very interesting thought, because, I think I said in my previous video that I made about Bonney and Kuma, where we kind of found out that they were, father and daughter, that I made the comment that we don't know if Bonney is Kuma's biological daughter. We do not know if she was just like a daughter, a little orphan that he adopted, that if she was his, daughter that he had adopted before he became king and then she became the princess, or, this whole ruse or guise or whatever that like they came up with, and why she like looks like or can pretend to be the Dowager Queen of the Sorbet Kingdom. We don't know. That has not been explained to us yet. Hopefully that's something that gets explained pretty quickly in the next couple of chapters, possibly, for why she can do that. Why, when she goes old, she looks like the Dowager Queen, and why everybody thinks she's the Dowager Queen. And, she looks at it and she knows that it's memories. And for how long she's been around her father, for the fact that we know that she's been around, that Kuma is, whether or not she knew that he was part of the Revolutionary Army is left up for debate. And again, I don't remember if Oda has actually confirmed Bonnie's age. I know he says it when she's in like her young form, not like her kid form, but her young form, that she's like 24 or 26 at this point in time. And I'm leaning toward that being her more accurate age. And, so that's why, her crew is willing to follow her because she's not like an actual child. Again, do Bonnie's crew know anything about this? Do Bonnie's crew know that she's Kuma's daughter, that she's this princess of the Sorbet Kingdom, that, all this other stuff? Do they know that? I don't remember if that's ever been explained. And if so, I don't know. Are we going to get a flashback for Bonney and Kuma that explains that? Hopefully. But the fact that Bonney knows that this is memories and not pain means that A, it must look somewhat different than the one that we saw at Thriller Bark, but also it means that she's seen it before. Does that mean that Kuma has like pushed out someone else's memories before? Has he done that to his own memories? Did he do that to Bonnie's memories at some point in time? We don't know. Did he, she's seen that before, though. That implies that she has seen this power, this version of her father's power before, of him being able to push out someone's memories. And that's kind of where the concept of like the weight of a soul comes in, because Vegapunk wanted to know like the weight of memories. And you're in regards to like getting metaphysical on stuff, your memories are what formed your soul to begin with. That if you don't have your memories, then your soul is not quite your soul. You are not quite you without your memories. And I'm going to go into a different video where I talk about that. But it's like you are not quite you without your memories. And in this case, Kuma is not Kuma without his memories. He has this programming, and throughout the course of, this conversation that we see Bonney and Vegapunk having, conversation / interrogation more than anything that we see Bonney and Vegapunk having, we keep cutting over to the red port where we see, the PX0, trying to climb up the red line. And this is the PX0 that is still very badly injured and stuff like that from being beaten by the Celestial Dragons, and then from having like Lindbergh trying to take him apart to put him back together to try to fix him and everything. And, that Kuma, that version of Kuma, that PX0, is just following the programming that's inside of it because it can't do anything else. It doesn't have any of its memories of being Kuma, of being Bonnie's father, of being Dragon and Ivankov's friend, of anything like that, because all of those memories are sitting inside of this giant bubble that was inside of this like locked room area in Vegapunk's lab. And that's why Kuma, that's why when they were at, Marineford and stuff like that, when it saw, Ivankov, when Ivankov tried to reason with it, it didn't work because it doesn't know anything about who Ivankov is beyond you're a captain in the Revolutionary Army, you were a prisoner and impelled down, this was your former bounty, blah, 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 blah. You are an enemy of the world government. And we know that Kuma asked Vegapunk to put in his programming to protect the Thousand Sunny. Now, there's a question of how much of those memories were taken all out at any given time. Were they all taken out at the same time? Were they taken out in chunks and then like slowly just like, every time Kuma would visit visit Egghead Island, that, more and more of those memories would be taken out of him. During his conversion from going from, human Kuma to more cyborg Kuma, more and more and more, all the way up through where he's just nothing but the PX0 anymore, where he doesn't have any other emotions. He doesn't have any free will of his own. Because at Thriller Bark, given the fact that he, made the deal with Zoro to like, oh, if you can take this pain and everything from your captain, then I'll let you and your crew go. That you'll leave here safely. And then even at, Saba Odi, we see some of that free will there where he still knows who the Straw Hats are. And now whether or not them getting sent off to different places was like Vegapunk having programmed that into Kuma could have been true, because like Vegapunk probably knows about all these different islands and everything like that. pretty sure Vegapunk has some idea about like Woodbury and like a bunch of these other places and such like that, because he's probably heard stories and maybe even tried to go to some of these different islands and stuff like that. Or, you know, via Dragon and him communicating, he's like, well, this is different places that would be good for the Straw Hats to go. And like maybe he knows that Frankie is an inventor, so that's why he sent Frankie to Karakuri Island in the first place. That's why, you know, oh, there's this kingdom that has these giant birds, but I also hear they have this great medicine. Let's send this, you know, the reindeer boy there. Not that he would necessarily know exactly who Chopper is, but, you know, via observations that Kuma may have made when he was at Thriller Bark, he may have noticed that, oh, this one's the doctor, this one did that, this one did that, so we'll send them to these different places. You know, let's send Zoro to Mihawk. You know, like all this other stuff. How much was Vegapunk a part of that in determining that? And, you know, so I just say that the fact that Bonney knows that no, that's not pain, those are memories. She's probably deduced, or at least within the next chapter, we'll probably figure out that those are my dad's memories. Why aren't those in my dad? And what did you do to my dad? What did you make him do? And eventually, as much as Vegapunk probably wants to keep his promise to Kuma, he's going to have to tell Bonney. He's going to have to tell Bonney or something, or she's going to continue to just be very angry at him and try to hurt him. And that's not going to be very conducive to helping Luffy and the others escape the island, so that way they can all get to safety and not get killed by CP-0. But, you know, it's Stussy, whatever the heck's going on with Stussy. You know, we don't know exactly what's going to happen with that, but Bonney is going to have this, you know, Vegapunk is going to have to explain to Bonney what happened. That I asked your father to take his memories out of his body so that way we could see how much they weigh. And then, you know, and then we put them back. And then via all this other planning and everything that happened, I ended up having to turn him into the PX0. And by the time that was done, to make sure that he preserved parts of his mind, seriously? One moment. So there's going to have to be this moment where, like, Vegapunk finally tells Bonney what's going on. That it's just like, okay, this is what happened with your dad, blah, 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 blah. Eventually had to convert him into the PX0. And instead of just, like, erasing everything from him, we put all of his memories into this. We used his Devil Fruit power to put all of his memories into this and then preserve it. And then I had certain coding into his programming that made it that he had at least somewhat free will at the moment. And that's kind of what resulted in why he was, you know, willing to make the deal with the Straw Hats. And it may result in the fact that one of the Straw Hats may end up asking about that. Possibly Sanji, since he witnessed part of what happened. But maybe Zoro will end up being like, hey, I recognize that thing. I have no idea why Zoro would end up seeing this, but considering the fact that, you know, Zoro may end up, you know, fighting, you know, finish up what's going on with Kaku and Lucci and stuff like that, and Stussy, because she may act as a distraction, and then, like, you know, the Straw Hats may show up or whatever, and, like, Zoro would get the ship out of there, and then, like, Zoro has the ability to get lost walking in a straight line down a straight hallway, and he could just end up finding this room and, like, showing up and being like, hey, wait a second, I recognize one of those bubbles. Bonney, what do you mean you recognize it? Yeah, I touched one of those at one point. It gave me a lot of pain from Luffy that, you know, the bear guy gave me. And it's just like, wait a second, you know who my dad is? Like, just blah, 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 blah. It could result in that. I don't know. That would be an interesting concept. I don't think there's a reason for Zoro to see this bubble, but unless it's like, Kuma's like, okay, well, we have to take this bubble with us. Or whatever the case may be, because maybe he's going to put that bubble into the Kuma Seraphim, the S-Bear. And then that will restore, you know, those memories into that Seraphim. And then that Seraphim will then want to protect Bonney, because those memories may override its programming. Because they got to figure out what to do with the Seraphim, because, like, yeah, one of the, you know, the different Vegapunk could show up and, like, give an order to the Seraphim to, like, no, you obey us now, and you obey the Straw Hats, regardless of what any of these people with an authority chip say, beyond what any of the CP0 agents say. You will obey and cooperate with the Straw Hats instead, because they are our allies right now. And that could just result in, like, the Kuma Seraphim end up, gets all of these memories inside of it, or he may just tell Bonney, I can't put your dad, as in, like, the one that became the PX0, back to the way he was, because none of what I did can be reversed at this point in time. There's been too much damage done to him, and he would never be the same again. That body is gone. That body is nothing but a hollowed out shell at this point in time. These are the memories that made up your father. These are the memories that made him who he was, what he wanted to do with the Revolutionary Army, what he agreed to on different things, how much he loved you, how much he cared about his kingdom. That's all inside of this bubble. And I can put that into something else, but I need the original Kuma to do that, or I need the Seraphim Kuma to do that because of, having the Niku powers, the artificial ones inside of that Kuma, inside of the S-Bear. That if I get that one, I can put these memories into there. And then those will restore those memories as much as possible back into something that is related to Kuma. I was going to go with, like, by the technicality, does that make the clone Kuma, the Seraphim Kuma, Bonnie's, like, weird clone father, or, like, a weird clone brother? I don't know exactly what to say about that, because it's like it's younger than Kuma, but I don't know, so I don't know exactly about that. But, is that what's going to happen? Because I don't know, but that was what I thought of, along with a couple of tangents. But, this implies Bonney has seen this before. And that implies of, when did that happen? Whose other memories did Kuma mess with? Did he try something where he was, like, showing Bonney a bunch of his powers because she was a kid and he was trying to entertain her and she was scared? And, this was, like, maybe, like, when he adopted her or something like that. I don't know. But those are my thoughts at the moment. I know I rambled. I'm sorry. I thank you for watching. I thank you for putting up with my Disney-centric brain, because I will try to connect Disney to a lot of things. But I thank you for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.